Welcome to the last section in our tools and techniques chapter. In this section, we're kind of showing you something that you can use with any layer, any adjustment layer, super cool effect called blend if. Now, if you've been watching Learn for a while, you've probably seen me do this before, but I just want to remind you that you can use this to color images, and it's so cool. So here in Photoshop, let's go ahead and open our blendif.jpg. Let's hit open, and we'll hit F for full screen. Now, basically, blend if is an option that's in your layer effects. So first thing I need to do is create a layer. So let's go ahead, I'm gonna just create a solid color layer, and let's just do like a deep purple. I like that, looks nice. So now that we have a layer, we have this FX is open to us, so we can click there and go to blending options. Okay, so if you've ever seen this with like bevel and emboss, stroke, and all that stuff, if you've ever seen this, you're in the right place. So let's hit OK. There, you can also just double click right here and it gets to the same thing. So either go to FX or just double click in the gray area near your photo. Okay, this tool is so incredibly powerful because it allows you to blend whatever's on your layer into the rest of your image, and you can do this based on the highlight or shadows, which means you can have super duper control on putting colors into just the highlights or the shadows, which is so fun. So here's how you do it. Here in your layer style, you're gonna see on the bottom this area that says blend if. All right, now where it says this layer, we don't really need to worry about that for most applications. Where we're gonna work on is where it says underlying layer. So it's gonna blend this purple with everything that's under it, which includes your actual image. Okay, now if I just take this slider here and go from the left to the right, you're gonna start to see pretty interesting stuff happen. Namely, you're gonna start to see the purple start to disappear from the dark areas, right? It's going away from her hair first, and then the hat, and then the background, and then kind of her skin, okay? Now if I go from the other way, go from the right to left, it's gonna start to disappear from the light areas, right? Starting to disappear from her skin and kind of leaving her hair last. Now, this is a pretty like crude example, not too acceptable because look how like jagged and stuff that looks. And that's because these sliders are actually two different sliders that are together by default. You have to hold Alt or Option to separate them out. That's the real key they don't tell you about. So let's do it. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option. There we go, and click and drag here. So immediately, if you see you got two little guys over there, then you did it correctly. Okay, so we're gonna take this and drag this from the right to the left, and now you're gonna see a much more subtle feathering of our image. So the purple is disappearing. There we go, let's just bring it back so we can see we have all this purple. The purple starts to disappear from the light areas, and as I keep going, you're gonna see it does a really nice blending into my image. And now we're just left with purple where the darks are in our photograph, which is cool. Let's go ahead and do the other way. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option, click and drag from the left to the right. You gotta hold Alt or Option, that's the big one. And now we've got purple just showing up where the lights are in our image, which is pretty cool. So because we are with using purple right now, let's just have it disappear from my lights. That's a little bit more appropriate. There we go. And you can even grab this one and have it disappear even more if you want, or you can work on your own little balance there. Now, of course, it's just a regular layer. You can change your opacity if you'd like. Okay, more or less of that little purple color. And you can even give it a blending mode. If I wanted it to be like a soft light, you know, just like a little bit of that nice purple into the shadows there, you could have it do that as well. Let's just set this back to normal for fun, because I like just a little bit of purple in the shadows. How fun. So let's hit OK. And you can see, just using a solid color fill layer and blend if, we were able to add really nice purples into the shadows, which is super fun. Let's see if we can add a little bit of red into like the mid-tone shadow areas, give the skin a little bit more red. So we're gonna create an adjustment layer here. I'm gonna go to solid color, and I'm just gonna use my eyedropper tool. It said okay there. Let's double click here. I'm gonna use my eyedropper tool to sample that red. I couldn't see what I was doing because it covered it up, so I just made it invisible. So now we have this red, and I want this to show up in our subject's skin. So let's double click here. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option to tell it to not be visible from the lightest part. Okay, something like that. And I also don't want it to be visible from the darkest part, so I'm gonna pull it from here as well. So here you can start to see it's basically just visible in the midtones of our subject. Okay, so it's not visible in the lights, not visible in the darks, just the midtones. Let's change this from normal to soft light and hit OK. And here we have a color that's just visible in the midtones now. And again, you can go in here and refine this as much as you'd like. So I'm going to make it a little bit less visible from the highlights. There we go. And it's got a layer mask. So I'm going to click on my layer mask and invert my layer mask by hitting Control or Command I. And I'm just going to paint white here on my subject. So we're adding just a little bit of color into the midtones. You can see how it's not even showing up over the highlights or the shadows, just the midtones, which is super, super fun. And let's just say I want to do one more fun thing. Let's add a fun color to the highlights. Let's grab our adjustment layers. I'm going to go to solid color again. I'm going to try this nice light blue. I kind of like it. We'll see. Let's double click here. I'm going to tell this not to be visible from the shadows. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option and separate those two out. And then really just in the highlights. So like, bonk, you can see it's disappearing and then bonk, just starts to show up. Too visible now. We just want to lower our opacity a little bit and just give it like just a touch of cool color in the highlights. I think it works on the background and her face. It's just not working so much on her hand. You just layer mask it away. Bonk, 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 bonk. No big deal. Take it away a little bit there. Let's let it blend in just a little bit better. There we go. And lower the opacity. So we've got just an interesting little bluish highlight, which you may not even notice that has that at first glance, but when I turn it off and on, you still do. Cool thing here is you can just double click on that color there and change it. Like, oh, now I want a greenish highlight or a yellowish highlight. You know, you can change these colors at any time. So Blend If is super, super powerful. Let's just hit OK right there. See, we get a little pink highlight on there. So there's the original image. We put the purples in the shadows. We put a little bit of that nice red, and I pulled the red color from her lips. We just put that in the midtones to kind of give the skin just a little bit more red, a little more life, and then popped a pink in the highlights. And it's just a nice fun thing that you guys can do with color. But again, using those Blend If, the Blend If feature is super cool. Now, let's just turn those off. I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to use a levels adjustment layer. Show you guys, you can do this super easy. Let's just go to our blue channel. I'm going to pump up the blues, pump up the yellows. Just pump it up. And then we'll double click right here and do the same thing with this adjustment layer. So I'm just going to tell this not to be visible in the highlights there. Lower our opacity. And then we've got some really fun color toning here going on blues and yellows. It's just showing up way more in the shadows than in the highlights because we use Blend If there. So don't forget, when you're coloring and toning your images, the real way to get kind of like advanced coloring and to like fine tune this stuff is to be able to target either your shadows, your midtones, or highlights. And in my opinion, my favorite way to target is through Blend If, because it's pretty easy to use and you see it right away. There's no like guesswork. It's just kind of does it for you. Well, guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this chapter on the tools and techniques that I use to color my images. Now, as we go through this tutorial, we're going to be doing some fun stuff with color correction. When you get all kinds of colors on people's skin you don't want, I want to show you how to fix that stuff. We're going to go over best practices, how to actually capture proper color. It's easier than you would think. And then we're going to give you some fun examples for color toning your images to get them like kind of like Instagram type effects, but way more powerful and a lot more control. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you in the next chapter. Bye, everyone.